thing we should be saying, but we're recording the meeting, and if anybody's recording, let us know. How's that for a start? Chuck, would you like to call the roll, please?
Sure. Jeremy?
Present.
Jim?
Present.
And I am here, so I think we've got a full attendance tonight.
Okay. And I think the appropriate place to start, where there was Mark sent along two sets of minutes. One from the one was the 18th, February 18th, and the other was the 30th, January. Was it? But anyways, I have not looked at them. If somebody else has and can vouch for them, I'm more than, I mean, I attended both meetings, but, or we can put it to the next session, whatever your preference would be. I have not looked at them.
Well, I'll get Jeremy's input too, but I looked at both of them on the plane, and they look fine to me. So I'd be more than happy moving that we accept both of them.
Okay.
I feel comfortable with that too. Yeah, I didn't see any issues. The nice thing about shorter meetings are shorter minutes.
Shorter minutes, right? Exactly.
So do you want to second that, Jeremy, so we can do the formal?
I will second that motion to approve the minutes.
All righty. So Jim, yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
And Chuck is yes. So we're good with the minutes.
Okay. So would you like me to share my screen? I've got pulled up the working document that Chuck started and I've used and continued on, and I can, Jeremy, I don't know if you've had a chance to add any more content.
I wasn't certain on the additions, but I did just post content for the schools in the folder. So that is in there.
Let's see. Oh, there is a schools document. There's a schools PowerPoint document.
And then as of maybe 4 minutes ago, there should be a Word document in there as well.
Oh, I may have to do an update then. Let's see here. Refresh. There it is. Yep, it's there.
So let me see if I can share my screen, and then I'll get Mark, once we get going, you're more than welcome to head over to your next meeting, whatever works for you. So we just do this.
Unmute myself. Yeah, once I leave, the meeting should continue, Jim, because you're a co-host.
So this last document here is the one I was referring to, and I'm looking for, there you go. I see the PowerPoint, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think, whoops. Yeah, I think, Jim, if you hit refresh.
I've got to refresh.
It shows up on mine. It shows up at the bottom on mine. As a Word document.
There it is.
Okay. Okay. So we could just, I'll just get started. I think Chuck passed around his document, which was highlights in red, green, and yellow. I've gone through some of them, made some changes. I have track changes on. So once we get inside of this document, I'm using this one here as kind of the common tool.
And this is the same one that's posted on the server, right?
Yes. So this is the one that you opened up.
Cool.
I see there's, okay. I get a notice that there's two people waiting to get in, but I don't recognize the names, so.
Could one be Hector?
No, it wasn't.
No, okay.
No. So, whatever I mean, we can go through this here. Let me just look at this again. Does anybody recognize either one of those names?
I do not.
I do not either, so I'm just gonna, unfortunately, I'm gonna err on the side of caution.
Yep.
So Chuck, I just went through the opening statement and made some corrections. You had some questions and I just made a decision on a few things. I'm
Okay.
using the source here for this content. I've identified it as the latest, the document that Mark just gave us yesterday.
Yes.
On the town CIP, I've identified that. My thought was to reduce some of this. You asked some questions about it and make it more, because all these questions came from 2024. This is a document that was developed then, so I don't think they're appropriate. This paragraph here, Chuck, you had a question about essential. It's really not done that way anymore.
Okay.
So I just removed that. And then here was about how the scores are evaluated.
Got it.
Okay. Any questions early on here?
Nope, not for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. Looks good to start.
Okay.
I mean, I assume, Jim, procedurally, that we have this open forum, and then we'll have some time based on whatever we do or don't change today to read it again and really give it some thought, and then
Correct.
continue to just share. Okay, good. Good.
So all you have to do when you go, when you open this up as a Word document, is that you just would ask that you put track changes on.
Yep.
Right, and then that highlights everything that you're doing. So,
And-
for example, this is an example where it's red and underlined. That's because when I input that information, it highlights it and it's ready to be reviewed once we get to the review cycle, and then change from there.
And I assume that Jeremy and I do not need to or probably want to mess around with the naming convention, that if we make an edit, we just make an edit, and as chair, you'll decide when we need to have a new version.
Yes, why don't we leave it that way for now? So
Cool.
that's, I would just say change at the tail end, change the date and the version number, and we're good.
Okay.
This is the new numbers. I'll have to work on this chart, Chuck, but this is the new updated numbers from
Got it.
down below that you were working on, and then I will have to expand it and I will include these new numbers.
Yeah,
to get
we
a
should
longer
just make-
perspective.
We should just make sure that Mark or Gareth check especially the older
Scrub.
numbers, because
Gotcha.
they likely will have changed to reflect reality as opposed to what was then a projection. So just as long as they're cool that we have the numbers right.
Okay.
I did find that note you had written interesting about the difference between the numbers from one year and then in the final report the following year. I mean, it's kind of significantly. I think it was $22.6 million versus $39 million.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think Mark gave us a hint at one point that one of the things that the town council might be interested in is why the numbers change. And there are probably multiple reasons. You know, projects change, you make more or less progress than you thought you would, things get reprioritized. So the variability does not, imply sloppiness or carelessness, but it is an inherent part of the process that there's just a lot of variability, not just prospectively year to year, but difference between what was submitted and approved and what actually was spent. So I think Mark was just saying it might be helpful if at some point we, not for every line item, but just in general, point out what can lead to variability and changes in numbers that were theoretically printed in ink last year.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be worthy of sharing, because I mean, you want people to have trust in the process, and if, you know, it's in that case, $16 million difference of what was spent versus, like, that's I mean, that's significant. So I think being upfront about it, of, you know, there's reasons, there's explanations that are rational and not worrisome, but still something to be aware of. And I guess then the question is, you know, if that money isn't get spent, where does it go?
Well, yeah,
Where does it go?
yeah, I think there's two things. So we could probably just say, for example, on something substantive, just to put a little meat on some actual bones, as opposed to keeping it at 50,000 feet. But I think Mark also talked about in one of the recent meetings about how money that was, I'm going to use the wrong word here, appropriated and unspent, might then be used in future years as a source of funds for current year projects. You know, again, just a point to be made so people understand that it's all part of an iterative, live, active process, and to nail things down to it's just not a realistic expectation.
It's not realistic.
Yeah.
Actually, can I say, Jeremy, where were those numbers you were referring to?
Well, I was just looking at that note there of that
Okay.
I assume you had written that fiscal year 21 down in that red paragraph right where your cursor is.
Yeah, no, that
Numbers
was,
shown in
that
the
was,
21 to 25 report was presented as 14.
Oh, right.
And then it's looking at compared with that report. I think that's I might have gotten the math wrong, but I just think that pointing out those differences between those numbers is, you know, it's striking.
And that was from our what Chuck was saying was that was a presentation Mark was doing on our last CFAC meeting, discussing those variances between appropriation and spent, right?
Yeah.
And some of those variances then carry over into the next fiscal year.
Yep.
You know, so we're just taking a look at the content. Probably it's not the best way to do it, but I think probably a better way is just when we start working on it individually, it'll make more sense.
Yeah,
So
I thought
here's I'm sorry.
as a way that you'd written everything up, I think it introduces what we are trying to introduce very well, and it's very clear. So I appreciated that about kind of how it's arrayed.
Okay. So general funds, Chuck, anything you want to highlight here?
No, you know, I think this is an example of, you know, in the green column where Mark or Gareth can, you know, make sure the numbers foot. But, you know, when I looked at, this is taken straight out of either the report that Mark sent out or the interviews that we did. And, you know, my thought in making these bullet points, although they aren't related directly to DPW all the time, was that, you know, just to, again, to give some color to this, to talk about some of the more impactful or expensive projects, just so people know how the money's being spent. But I just took a shot at, you know, what I viewed as either visible projects or fiscally substantial projects.
And I did do I'm trying to do some research on the Chapter 90 because some of it falls into debt service, and I couldn't find 8, this highlighted section. 8 will be referred to as communities. There is a section, obviously, in community preservation that I could see 3 million is set aside for those projects, and then there's $1 million done for roads.
Yes,
That's all.
I think what's true is, I think the highlighted section is the verbatim verbiage from the FY24 report. So those numbers are,
Oh,
it was just a placeholder
Okay.
to say we should address the topic. It does not have to be, I just don't want to forget. So when I put it in yellow, it means the numbers are wrong, but I like the topic.
I see Betty has raised her hand, so feel free to turn your mic on. Betty?
Yeah, no, I'm struggling here. Here I go. No, I just was quite surprised by that Osterville Recreation Project. What is that? I mean, I thought that had gone by the wayside. Is that an actual building or what is that?
Yeah, it's a significant project. If you want, I can put it up on the screen here somewhere.
I thought that had gone by the wayside. I thought that we were doing the playground, which was enormously expensive in and of itself, but the rest of it had been complete with the tennis courts and things like that.
Yeah, it's the bathrooms that is that project, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a comfort station. Let's see, hold on. But that's too many to scroll through, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's right by those new fields.
So it's a bathrooms and other stuff for 15 million.
Is that the final?
I'm sorry, it just really jumped out. Like, what the heck?
I think that one, I'm seeing 1.6 million
No,
for that
Betty's
one.
right. Somewhere in there I saw 13 million. And so that, what she said it, now I'm trying to find it.
I mean, there
Wow.
used to be a whole building, I thought, Jim, that was proposed, but I thought that went by the wayside. But I know it's just a startling thing to put in the report. I think other people are going to have the same reaction as I.
So I think we can just make a note to make sure we're very specific on this particular bullet. A, to confirm it's right, and then B, to be abundantly clear about what it is, what it covers.
Yeah, if you could, because I was there for the vote for the playground.
Yes.
And it was quite contentious with one of my fellow Hyannis counselors kind of making a wisecrack about, well, how many kids are in Osterville,
Right.
Just because, all the playgrounds in Hyannis are pretty much at the public schools. So I just wondered, if there's now 15 million more to do some sort of recreation thing, I mean, it just needs to be really explained, especially since you've highlighted it. It needs to be rock solid what it is.
Got it.
That's the one. It's the year is 2029 is what they are looking out at. So yeah, it's not the town manager didn't put it forward for this year.
No, I saw that it was 29. I just wasn't what else was going on out there. Is that the bathrooms you're saying? That's it?
Yeah, there's the bathrooms. That's the 1.6 million. And that I haven't seen that project yet. They haven't presented that. So I don't really know what that, it's a great question because that is a lot of money. So I feel like we would also have a lot of questions about that one.
Yeah.
I do think because the context for this particular paragraph and bullets is the 5-year plan, not the FY26 plan, that these numbers came straight out of the quote unquote approved submission. So we'll get detail on it, but I'm pretty sure this number is correct, even if it's forward dated 3 fiscal years.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Didn't mean to interrupt your flow here. Thank you.
Oh, no.
Good question.
So I did get a chance to go through all of this, and this all looked very well done, Chuck. Thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
Chuck, I very much used yours as the example for mine, so I
Well, yeah.
appreciated.
That page that you're starting on among that, those are DPW. So I tried to stay in my lane on those particular bullets. So, you know, Jim, when we get, you know, the reporting kind of semi-final form, if there's kind of disproportionate weighting once schools are in there and CWMP, then no problem at all cutting the DPW verbiage. It's just easier to take stuff out than it is to add it in.
Right. I think it'd be serve us well if we can say around 10-page report. You get much longer than that, then there's just too much content to absorb.
Yeah, and I guess
Again,
so for town council, when they are presented with this report, are they voting individually on each project? Is that ultimately what they do, just their end of the road on this? Or are they voting on this as a group?
I believe it's individually. Betty may know that.
Yeah, no, I struggled to get this mute thing, but yes, we do vote individually on every project, correct.
So would it be helpful then in this report to have write-ups about every project that is being recommended by the town manager?
I think it'd be impossible to do it. And there's tons of content already. If you look at the town manager's report, which I think that's what
Yeah, I think that would be duplicative. We have that in each project comes with a rationale that's very deep. I mean, the book is enormous. So I don't think that would be value added for you guys. I would think the value added for you guys is that 10,000-foot view that kind of looks at trends and, you know, where are we and that kind of thing. I would not recommend that.
Great. Thank you. That is very helpful.
Does that make sense, Jeremy, to you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I mean, part of what I was doing with the schools, I was like, I need to talk about every project. And I'm sitting here now being like, this maybe isn't as useful as stepping back and being like, we as a community have a lot of schools to maintain. How are we going to do this? And what is the expected cost to do this?
Yeah, I mean, especially with the schools, that would be very valuable, you know, with that proposal to, you know, tear down the schools, build one giant K-3. You know, I was on when the school subcommittee, I guess, presented that. I wasn't real convinced by any of their arguments. So, you know, your look at that would be very valuable to me because I thought their arguments were not convincing at all for that.
Yeah. So would you find then especially for the schools, I mean, it's a huge chunk of money and there's certainly a lot that has been recommended by the town manager. I mean, we on the committee, I think, collectively support the idea that maintenance that's proactive is something that is in the best interest of the town. And I frankly might assume, and maybe I'm wrong, that the town council is probably under the similar vein, but when it comes to that big question, that might be the area then for us to spend time on is there's a school project being proposed and what are our thoughts around that? Like, I mean, we could touch on some of those bigger maintenance projects, but spending more time on what I think is the elephant in the room, would that, do you think, be better use of our report space?
As I say, enormously valuable. I have no problem with proactive maintenance. I mean, my goodness, you know, keeping the schools, that's what you do. You know, so that's why I say I would really love your guidance because I wasn't convinced with their presentation. So certainly another set of eyes. Yes, Jeremy.
Great, thank you.
And I do think it's one of the things, not to be a slave to the way we've done these reports in the past, but you know, once we kind of get this, my approach to these things has always been granular, then step back, because once you see all of the enterprise and general fund plus CWMP numbers together, you start seeing trends and as Betty said, then, you know, we go to 10,000 feet and say, this is what we think. And I think that's one of the things that Neil's report last year did particularly well, was put context and trends into you know, in the report. So to me, that's the next step.
So again, Chuck made some entries here in the comments section. I put in a section here for the debt service, which we can review once we get a chance, and then going into the concluding comments. And here, I made a comment here, Jeremy. This, I think we should take out the private roads. I mean, it is a valid issue, but again, this was working with something from 2024. I think this might be a good area for you to put your thoughts in a paragraph on, you know, the school maintenance and operations. You know, this might be an area to start to talk about that in our concluding, or a section in our concluding comments. I'm sure you'll get to it in detail in your document, but.
Great. Yeah, I will be happy to. It's but what I've been thinking about the most. I enjoyed looking at the individual ones, but I think it really is. I mean, the community has a lot to think about when it comes to schools, and you know, it's right. We had meetings yesterday. I mean, speaking as a teacher, you know, the assistant superintendent is meeting with staff about, you know, potential cuts and layoffs that are going to happen this year. And then there's also, though, like this broader, like that's the school that's today, but we have a system, and that's, you know, hopefully for hundreds of years that we need to think about. So yeah, they are, you know, it's a lot to think about for the schools.
And I would add that removing that private roads would be, I think, a positive thing. We have had so many workshops on private roads. In the last one, I thought we gave very clear guidance to the town manager. There was a list of priorities. I don't see it in your report, but I don't think we have to see it in there, of how to take the private roads. And there was consensus that that's what we want to do, understanding it's enormously expensive. So they would work on it as it came up. But I think we're in good shape on that. So I would have no problem. And I think the rest of the counselors have had kind of their fill of private roads.
Yeah, and I think that was a topic of particular interest to Hector 2 years ago. So, I mean, I'm perfectly cool with just dropping it from this report.
Okay. You know, something that Jeremy had thought about it, Chuck, as well. Just, you know, this whole maintenance is such a big deal, that I wonder, you know, if we're organized as a town to be able to cope with something like that. This school department, you know, is dealing with, you know, 30 plus years since I've been here, with superintendents that haven't paid any attention to it, and now it appears that Superintendent Ahern, with her operations people, really want to go after this, and I applaud them for that. My question is, do they have the skill sets and resources to be able to do even the engineering work, et cetera, and then do is it something that we could consider making a recommendation that there be a new department with, you know, that would be report to the town manager, like Director Santos does as DPW? That maybe that's I'm sure it's been discussed. That's probably not new stuff, but it almost seems like facilities, if it's not properly addressed, you know, over the next 10 years, then the only way you can address it is through an override. And, you know, we've been given guidance on how, you know, what the likelihood of that is. So
I think you make a great,
over.
yeah, because the reality of the situation is the schools have gone through multiple facilities directors in the last couple of years. And I cannot imagine that job to come in and say, you have to deal with day-to-day operations, but also you need to strategize a long-term plan, which might involve replacing roofs to schools. I mean, it's such an immense job And it seems like a thankless job, frankly. Like I don't know how many times I've emailed the directors and then they're like, hey, there's a new email because we have a new director. So I think that, I mean, as a suggestion, but also just the reality is the town needs to really look at how we take care of the schools. And I truly think right now, our facilities director and the superintendent have they spend a lot of time thinking about both of these. But I think saying like they might need help is they need help. This is something that is immense, and having just those two people think about it, it's a lot.
Yeah, no, Jim, your point is very well taken. I mean, that was my background. I was a civil engineer in the military, and to think it always just seems like there's two people working this at the schools. I mean, that is absurd. I mean, just how we were set up, kind of like Dan Santos is. You have an engineering department that does your design and this kind of thing, and then you have an operations department that does that day-to-day stuff. And to think you have one guy doing that's an insane proposition.
It's insane.
That's a road to failure, which is perhaps why we are at failure. So I love your idea. And this is the kind of thinking when you guys analyze the data are telling you something. And we can always look backwards, but let's look forwards. But I think it's a fantastic idea. And I don't know. If you maintain things, you can keep them going. And, you talk to folks who were here when the intermediate school was built, they said that roof flaked on day one. And you look at the problems out at the Barnstable United Elementary, with the mold and all that. So that's one of the newer schools. I don't know that newer is better.
Right.
My kids went to Hyannis East. I love that school. I think it has great bones there. It's really a comfortable school. I don't know. So I think you're really onto something. And I think your exploration of this would be very value added. So fantastic. Good. I like it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be more than one way to approach it. And I think that our history has shown that, overrides and debt exclusions are just not the path to be taking for projects like this.
The other kind of generic challenge, and I know you're trying to go to a ball game, Jim, is that
you didn't hear that, did you?
People rightfully stay in their silo when they come up with ideas about overrides, but Betty and the town council have to deal with that issue on a rolled up basis, and there's perspective that maybe you lose when you just make the case for how a thing could be funded via an override, via the impact of an aggregate override on everybody. So yep.
Okay, let me just do this if I can.
So just what I sent out is a bit of just philosophical thoughts at the top, and then I literally went through each project. So I'm thinking now and talking now, that's clearly not something necessarily both needed nor something I would do. So I'm going to go in and make some changes, but I do stand by the beginning.
Okay, do you want me to dump this in? I was just going to put it at the end and you can grab it and move it as you need.
Yeah, perfect.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, for what it's worth, that would be helpful, I think, to me, and I'll speak for Hector, just have everything in the same place, because I think everything I wrote is subject to rewrites, and I'd like to take a look at this too now that we have it.
Great.
So I'll move this. I'll let you work on this, and when you're done, you can. We're still at the point where just make your best guess. So it would be part of the general fund. So somewhere in this general, when you get done with where you're at a point, you can put it right in before enterprise funds.
Right.
Perfect.
And just your heading would be schools. Okay. So that's great progress. Let's just do this for a second. So we're here. We have one more meeting. So we have basically 2 meetings between now and when we present to our team on the 10th. I'm sorry, what am I talking about? There we are here. So we've got work to do between now and the 10th. Either that or we move the date, one of the two. I will be, like Chuck is, I will be traveling next week. I will still be able to work on the document, but won't be here in lovely Centerville. You want to still, at this point, you want to still hold that date of the 10th with the CFAC team?
Yeah, let me, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. The way it's formatting, I can't really read the screen here, but I have it printed out, so I just got my version of this.
Okay.
Yeah, so this says we're going to, the version I have anyway says we're going to finalize our recommended report on the 18th and then submit it to CFAC on the 24th. Is that what your sheet there says?
So I have a date here of March 10th, which would be next Tuesday, I believe, of preliminary submission. So we would submit this to our CFAC team, right, probably at a CFAC, to let them review it. Because this is a lengthy, as Chuck knows, it's a lengthy review process. Then we would have 2 follow-up meetings and then a final review on the 24th of March. So
Okay, got it.
that date really, Chuck, on the 10th, I mean, I could see that moving to why do I have, that's kind of an odd. Oh, I see. March 10th, is that a Monday? Is that a Monday night?
That's the regular CFAC meeting.
Okay. Okay, so here we are. So we could present that. Let's see, then it goes to 24th, right? So that's.
Yeah, so to me, this is kind of 2 scenarios here. One, we stick with that scenario that's laid out on your screen and, communicate that in all likelihood, since it's only 6 days from now, it would safely be called a rough draft. And we just ask for input from, 30,000 feet. Does it look like the flow looks good topically, blah, blah, blah. And then we'd have 2 weeks to pretty it up for the final review, or we bag the 10th, we use the 11th as a chance for the 3 or 4 of us, if Hector's going to be on, to go through the draft, and then sometime after the 11th, we post it and ask people to please review it prior to the 24th. The downside to the latter part is because of the public meeting laws, we're kind of stuck waiting till the 24th, I think. And if there's an uproar, we may not have the time we want to do anything. So it may be safer to stick with the schedule as you laid it out, Jim, and just with a proviso that the group needs to know that this is
Yeah, I mean, it's
a 5th inning report. It's not a bottom of the 9th report.
But we've got some work to do to get it to that point, right? Yep. So I would highly suggest that we all have our rough drafts done for our respective topics in time for a presentation on the 10th.
Okay.
Which should be next Monday.
Yep. Selfishly, I would like that too, because I'm iffy for the meeting on the 18th because of travel. And so if we can be more comfortable with where we stand following our next subcommittee meeting on the 11th, I just feel like there's less risk involved. So I'm all for your suggestion, Jim. selfishly.
Okay, yeah, and I think,
Yeah,
I think we just,
I would also be ready to have kind of my sections done for that meeting too.
okay. Okay,
Okay, so we're going to do that then. We're each going to go in, look at our sections, make any generic comments we have. Jim, I guess it's you. I remember doing this as chair. So, but we'll then kind of format and put things in the right order and that kind of stuff. But content we'll hopefully just hand to you, and that's what we'll look at with the full CFAC group
Yep.
next Monday. Cool, that works.
okay. All right, and that is on
day-
our report is on next week's agenda, so.
Yes. Yep. Nope. I think that's awesome.
Is there any flexibility in next Tuesday time-wise? I'm gonna be in Tennessee. Later, earlier, I mean, I don't, obviously everyone's got, you've got school, Jeremy, but,
Yeah,
I just, I'm gonna try to make, I will do everything I could do to make 6 o'clock on both of those.
I'm fully flexible before or after. I'm kind of free after 2 o'clock your time.
Okay,
I have, let's see, I am good really whenever as well. I am not, we're getting close to the Little Mermaid, but I'm not on for rehearsal on Tuesday. So whatever works.
all right, man, thank you very much, I appreciate it. And,
The only other thing, Jim, and I'm happy to do this, is I think we should suggest that Hector attend the next subcommittee meeting. I know he's floating and blah blah blah, but I think
okay,
it just
I thought he said he was gonna be here.
Yeah.
But something must have come up.
so. But I think it'll, for us selfishly, again, it will take some of the risk out of a burp if Hector is involved in the subcommittee discussion on the 11th. So
Okay,
I'm happy to drop him a note and just say, hey, I think hopefully he can make the time to do that.
okay,
Cool.
just make sure we're all on distribution, that's all.
I will do that. Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Jeremy, do you have any questions at this point?
I guess what would be for us to have it ready, or for you, Jim, to have things ready for Monday's meeting? What would be a kind of deadline that you could give me? When would you want kind of my final?
I'd like your content by Friday. That would give me, Saturday we're here, Sunday's a travel day, and I could be ready for Monday.
Great.
Will do. Okay.
All right.
Cool.
Well, we'll get to work.
All right. All right. Thank you, and,
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
yes, please.
So moved.
Second,
All right. Jim,
yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
and Chuck is a yes. So we're good, and good meeting.